frackers are coming! The frackers are coming!
I'm here at Cuca Lake, and this is the crown jewel of the Finger Lakes, and I've been coming here since I was a baby. Our family had so many good times on this lake. You know, we didn't have much money. We had an old wooden boat. We used to go up this lake and down and go to the Hammond Sport Museum. It was like absolutely great. Some of the best times of my life have been on this lake. And I feel really strongly about not having it where all you see is, 8 drill pads per every square mile. And, they want to put 60,000 wells on in 7 counties.
Jeff, you won't believe it.
What?
Chesapeake Energy wants to put a disposal well in our town of Poultney.
Where?
Just a half mile from the lake.
A half mile from the lake?
Yeah, they want to inject fracking fluid from the gas wells down in Pennsylvania. They want to haul it all the way up from Pennsylvania and inject it underneath our town.
You gotta be kidding me.
I'm not kidding. It's serious. Look.
Oh my word.
I still say we should do a documentary movie against hydrofracking so that people can get informed.
But we've never done a movie before.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
Yeah, but let me play the devil's advocate. I mean, we're already working about 60 to 80 hours a week trying to get this farm up and running, the house done, the farm market. We don't have the funds. I mean, the budget is extremely tight. Where are we going to scrounge up enough money to get camera equipment and editing equipment and all this other stuff?
Then when we get the movie done, we'll take it to firehouses across the Finger Lakes in southern tier of New York so we can let people know what's happening, and we'll pass a bucket asking for donations and hope we get the money back.
Okay.
I've been really trying.
Give it to a kiss and she'll buy it.
Trying to hold back this feeling, but so.
So we're just gonna do that.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
If you asked Jeff and Jodi Andrusik last year what they'd be doing, it probably wouldn't include making a documentary.
It's been an experience.
The couple started their endeavor after protesting a planned Chesapeake wastewater well in their town of Poultney. The town resisted, and Chesapeake Energy retracted its offer. Recognizing the power of activism, Jeff and Jodi got a camera and invested a lot of their own money to spread their views on hydraulic fracturing. Their film is called All Fracked Up, and they plan to screen it across upstate New York.
And it just seems like we should be able to do more. So we're hoping that this documentary gets out there and people come and watch it and then they get involved in the battle.
The couple spent time in Pennsylvania, and throughout their travels, they say they began noticing some similarities.
We filmed across the state. We could see a pattern. You have ruined wells, you have devastated property values.
Ultimately, the couple says the most important lesson to take away from their experience is to stand up for what you believe in.
If someone truly believes in something strongly, that they should step up and get involved with it. Don't expect someone else to do the battle for them.
The local dry cleaner has more regulations than a hydrofracking pad. And that's due to, well, a great deal to Dick Cheney. We know that he had a secret oil meeting in the year 2000, which we'll probably never learn the details of. But in 2005, Cheney had Congress approve what is called the Halliburton exemption. And it exempts the oil and gas industry from most provisions of all major environmental laws, all federal environmental laws, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Superfund. And so there are very few federal controls over this industry. And so most of the regulation then falls to the state. What we've seen in Pennsylvania is that no state is properly equipped, does not have the right regulations, and that's part of the problem that we have in New York State. We have a DEC that is conflicted, and we'll probably come back to that later, but it only has 17 people in the Minerals Resource Division to handle all of these well applications, to supposedly go out and inspect the wells as they're being driven. There's just no way they can do that. When we look at the numbers in Pennsylvania, there are 1,300 new wells in the last 2 years. They are now scrambling. There is a generic environmental impact statement that applies to gas wells. If I want to build a subdivision of 5 homes in my town, I have to go through a full State Environmental Quality Review Act, notice to the neighbors, public hearing. That secret process does not apply here. All they have to do is fill out an elaborate form. If they check off the right boxes, they're going to get their permit, and there's no notice to the neighbors or anyone else. So that process just does not work. We do not need to turn the Finger Lakes into Texas. We need to learn from all the mistakes and all the damage and all the tragedy that this industry has caused recently in the Gulf, but in Colorado and Wyoming. Fracking has ruined people's lives and ruined water supplies.
This is Jeff and Jodi taking off from beautiful Keuka Lake. They decided to fly over the Pennsylvania fracking operations. The pilot was going to charge them, but upon seeing the massive industrialization involved with fracking, he said, "No way do I want this in New York State. This flight is on me." During the flight, the filmmakers became more resolved than ever to film the gross devastation in Pennsylvania.
The drilling in the Marcellus Shale requires hydrofracking. Now what you hear about in the newspaper is, well, they pump water down there and they fracture the rock. That's not true. What happens is first they drill, they go down and then they go off at an angle, go into the Marcellus, then they put a pipe in there. Then they pour concrete in there to seal around the pipe. Then they put shape charges in there. Shape charges are the kinds of things they use to blow up tanks in Iraq. Then they blow off those shape charges, which blow holes in the concrete, the metal pipe, and fracture the rock vertically. When that happens, anything can happen. This is not your usual vertical well drilling.
It is impossible to predict where any hydraulic fracturing event will wind up. There's no single fracture, like in the beautiful, ideal computer models I worked on 15 years ago. You're fracturing a system that contains many, many joints, and we don't know the geometry of those joints. When we start fracturing it, we have no idea which joints are being opened, which ones are being closed, where the flow goes, where the flow does not go. So for the industry to say it's a well-controlled process is nonsense. They can't know for sure. They can never predict where that fluid that they put down there is going, how much of it's going to come back, and where the fluid is down there is eventually going to wind up. Anybody who tells you that is not obeying the laws of physics.
Well, it's very clear that Halliburton played a major role in the Deepwater Horizon well blowout. And actually, the Halliburton Company was formed in 1924. Its title was the Halliburton Oil Well Cementing Company. We've learned in the last month that $1.7 billion of their profit comes from cementing oil and gas wells. 11% of Halliburton's profit comes from cementing gas wells. It is the major source of protection for water supplies, particularly the first 1,000 feet of a hydrofrack well. Their claim to protect the water supply is that the casing is cemented. Now what they mean is they drill the hole, they pull the bit out, they put a pipe down the hole, and then they force concrete down through the center of the pipe, and supposedly that's then supposed to come up around the outside of the pipe, between the pipe and the wellbore hole. That's called the annular space. The problem there is that, first of all, Portland cement is very brittle, and it just doesn't work. Even Schlumberger, which is one of the major companies in this racket, has a document that says all wells leak because of the cement casing failures. And so we see that the cement casing failure was one of the major causes of the oil well blowout. It will be the same problem here. It will be how the gas and the methane and the chemicals will leak into the water supply here. That's what happened in Dimock, Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania state authorities have identified that as the error that led to that gas well blowout. Most people in New York, I live in Cortland County, where we have a sole source aquifer. About 30 feet down is an aquifer, a glacial aquifer. 80,000 people get our well water out of that aquifer. One mistake in that aquifer, we all have lost our drinking water supply.
We had an incredibly rainy summer, and it rained every day. And it was kind of funny, it was almost on a schedule. It rained every day at about 4 in the afternoon. The water trucks would go up and down the road, and they would spray water out the fronts and the backs of them, and they would very slowly apply water very thickly all the way from the bridge at the end of Carter Road to the entrance of Carter Road, or they would go from the entrance to the bridge and then turn around and do the other side of the road. And they would make sure they just totally coated the road with this stuff.
There are some trucks, it was either last summer or the summer before, I can't even remember now, that they had filled with probably waste, like fracking water, that they were pouring onto the road, and there was a big brush, and it was like they were washing a dirt road for pretty much no reason. And I guess it was for dust control, but it just made the road really slippery. And my little sister Leanna likes to ride her bike a lot, and she would slip and wreck because the road would be really slimy and there would be a lot of foam, sort of that kind of thing. What they were doing is pretty much getting rid of the wastewater. They would have, all these things saying, well, our water is 100% recycled, and I guess by recycling they mean dumped on your road.
One of the houses we were looking at to purchase, they're putting in a hotel and a huge truck stop right down the street. So we decided not to buy that for the safety factor and the traffic that just never stops. And right now we're living right across the bridge here, and it's just day and night, non-stop water trucks, gas trucks, all day. It's just horrible. You can't hardly get out to walk across the street.
Are you afraid?
But yeah, there's nowhere to run and play, obviously, and that I don't feel safe with them walking across the street to the park. And I heard it was not like this. A year ago, even 2 years ago, it was not like this.
It looks like aliens are taking over. It's just they're everywhere. On every road you go, it's nonstop. Yeah, it is an invasion. Absolutely.
We never see Pennsylvania trucks. They're all Texas, Oklahoma, out of state, some from New York. But yeah, I thought it was supposed to bring a lot of industry here and a lot of jobs, and I don't see that.
12:34, Monday,
August 2nd.
p.m.
I've sent that off to quite a few elected officials. They think it's a really significant point that this business shares a page of concerns, including environmental impact, environmental cleanup, fatalities, blowouts, explosions. They share that with their investors so that they know what they're getting into, because I guess they have to. But the landowner is never told any of that. There might be a Christmas tree. You'll never know we were here. And that's what everybody thinks until they have all the leases signed up. Then, ba-boom, you see you're in awe of the parade coming down your road, this equipment. You never imagine the first wave that comes in to clear cut. The machine up on the hill with these, looks like a giant insect, something out of a Mad Max with big claws, pulls a tree and throws it like it's a stick. And you watch this and you think, oh my God, what is happening? And then a year later you have 27 wells. And then the following year you have 62.
Wow.
And you're reeling because all you were told was there might be a well out here. Now how can that be legal? This is the United States of America. How can that be accepted as, oh, it's just the way they operate? A senator's office told me that. This is historically how the gas industry operates. And I said to them, historically, we had children laboring. Historically, we had women couldn't vote. It's time you rein in the beast and fix a wrong.
When we talk about the square mile that generally is considered for gas drilling, and you have 60% of the people that want to drill, and then you have 40% that, let's say, don't want to drill, that those 40% get compulsorily integrated into the drilling, whether they wanted it or not. Then they get offered generally half the money in terms of royalty and percentage that they derive from the gas drilling. The thing I learned the other day was that in addition to that, that the liability that generally you would think would only go to those that had agreed to have the drilling occur also gets borne by the 40% that didn't agree to it. So that if you had an accident in the drilling process and the companies that come in now claim that the people that are deriving money should be the ones that are liable if something is untoward, so they're pushing the liability situation off onto the individuals that whose land is being leased and drilled on. The 40% that originally didn't want to be drilled are also liable if something happens. So not only are they being forced into under sort of like an eminent domain situation,
but they're also being given the liability if something goes wrong in the drilling. Just add to the situation outside the liability situations for the insurance companies, the banking industry now has decided that because this constitutes such a threat and a liability, that some of the largest banks in America are no longer going to allow mortgages on leased gas properties. This includes Wells Fargo, and includes Bank of America, includes Fidelity, and some of the other banks down in northeastern Pennsylvania where this drilling is taking place. This is the reality. So these banks down in northeastern Pennsylvania are not allowing mortgages to leased gas land, and this has resulted from the kind of exposure that those drilling rigs have had in, I think it was Susquehanna County down in Pennsylvania. And if it comes into New York, there's absolutely no reason to not believe that the banks will do things in New York the same way they're doing in northeastern Pennsylvania.
We had a boilerplate lease, and that without any amendments. But we didn't know that you could have amendments.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because the landman said this is the standard lease,
right,
which wasn't a lie, but he didn't give us any information
right,
on,
not full disclosure kind of
what
thing.
they were going to do. And one of the paragraphs says, the gas company must comply with state and federal regulations. So I think that means we're covered.
That you're protected,
I always thought that DEP was this strong. I'd heard you couldn't put anything in the wetlands.
Right.
You couldn't haul a log across the creek unless you had a permit.
Right.
And the stone quarry guys said they were all over them out here, finding them all the time.
So you thought you'd be protected.
I thought they would be all over this.
Right.
What I didn't realize was for 5 counties, there were only 2 inspectors.
For the whole 5 counties?
For the 5 counties. When I found out they were going to drill just 700 feet from my house, that maybe we should get a water test. And I had gone to a few Penn State informationals, and they said if you're within 1,000 feet of your water source is within 1,000 feet of a gas well, you need to get a water test. I called the gas company and said, look, I heard I need a water test, and the landman said, you're a worrier, little lady, you don't need a water test unless you're going to have a gas well on your property. And I said, no, now I went to Penn State. And he goes, oh, that Penn State, they're just, getting people all excited. So he basically said no to my request. We did get a water test independent of
So you paid for the water test?
Yes. And, we didn't have manganese, and we didn't have, methane, and it was fine. Now we have manganese at twice the level that's drinkable, and long-term use of that water can cause brain damage. We've had elevated iron, not like our neighbors though. Their iron was off the chart. It would cause organ failure if you drank their water. People have aluminum in their water, we have barium, we have a lot of things in the water, and some things that we don't know because the gas company and DEP do not test for the fracking chemicals, the huge list of chemicals.
They don't test for them.
No, you have to do that specific test. To find it, you have to know what you're testing for.
And yet you don't know what's in it. You don't know what they use in their frack chemicals.
Mm-hmm. 9 square miles, 9.5 square miles, we have 62 wells. And 12 of those have been determined to be defective, failed casing and cement, or overpressurized. But the concrete failed so quickly and the casing failed so rapidly. These are new wells. What is the prognosis for long term? What's a 10-year well going to do? Michelle Boufadel is one of the professors, talking about how these things mix with what's already in the earth. I mean, there's bad stuff down there that's supposed to stay down there.
Right.
So we're bringing that up too. Right. Plus, the chemicals that do come back up.
It was January 1st of last year that I went to my daughter's for New Year's dinner, and when I come home, we found a big hole in the ground, and my water had blew up, and it blew aside right in the concrete, and when it did, it lifted thousands of pounds of concrete up off the top of the hole.
So that's from your water.
Yeah. My water.
The methane in your water blowing up, and it
just went from bad to worse. And for 8 or 9 months, I had to buy my own water. I didn't get any water until September or October of this year. This last year, 2009, I got it. And I'm on a fixed income. I didn't have money to buy water. I had to water my animals. I had horses. I had to sell them. I couldn't give them bad water. And just to go to the sink and get a glass of water, you don't know what that means to you. It means that we'll probably never get good water again.
Right.
We will never be able to drill another well.
Right.
The aquifer is gone.
Right.
And it's spreading.
It's all contaminated.
It's spreading. It's up to 35 wells that are just right around here.
35 wells.
Keeps spreading farther and farther.
Yeah, because they'll never take it out of the aquifer. That gas will just keep going right in there. We only got, and then you get people on here telling us, well, they shouldn't be bitching. They got all this money up front. Well, I got $250 an acre and 12.5, which is the least they can give anybody. And some of my neighbors paid $25 an acre. So we didn't get anything.
Right.
I mean, look at my home. I have nothing. My husband died 2 years ago. I have nobody here to help me.
Right.
And then they tell people to drink the water. We're not drinking yellow water. It's
What a sad commentary
Well,
on
not
this.
only when we drink it will we be infected, it will be when we bathe with it.
Right.
Because we've been told by scientists that the water goes in our pores quicker than if we drink it with a glass of water.
We had very, very good water before they drilled.
Gene, can you tell us about the well pad here? I know it's right off your front porch, so you have to look at it all the time. I had heard some noises over there or something like that.
Yes, there's vapors that come out of those big round barrels out there, and that collects the fluid that comes up with the gas. I guess it would be frac fluid, right? Comes up with the gas and it separates, and that fluid goes into the round drums over there, and every few minutes you can see it and you can hear it. It releases vapors. Yeah, right into the air.
Tank out there is venting about every 10 minutes. I asked him, what is that stuff that's spraying out? He said, you don't want to know.
Yes, he's still on them.
Both
My
use them every
husband had
day.
to go on inhalers, 2 different types of inhalers because of breathing problems. And I'm short of breath also. I mean, I know that this is affecting us. We can feel it. Yeah, but we love to sit on this front porch. We've always sat out here. We sat out here, and I don't know what it's doing to us, but...
Have you had upper respiratory problems before?
No.
No. And then you both have the problems at the same time.
Right. Yeah, at the same time.
Yeah, we both had it. Cabot told us that whenever we wanted a drink of water, just to fill the glass up and set it on the counter and wait about 30 seconds until it stopped bubbling, and then it would be safe to drink it.
It was so bad that when you took a shower, it stayed on your skin. Wash clothes with it, the smell stayed on your clothes, the towels.
Right.
And the taste was, you couldn't stand it. We couldn't drink it. The pressure switch is in the top of the well. When it would that build up in there, and when it would call for water, you'd get a spark, and it was igniting it, and it was blowing that cap off the top of the well. It did it, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times, 4 times, 5 times. It got worse. It kept getting worse. The 1 month it blew it off 3 different times. It blew it off twice in 1 week. And that's when they come around and said, Cabot's request, they would like you to have water. They want to shut your well off. DEP wanted to be able to take water samples from the well, the water coming from the well, but they can't. they can't get the okay to turn the pump back on because they're afraid that when they do, it's going to explode.
Drilling rigs, all different kinds of trucks to make, start drilling and everything. By the time we got done, I counted over 35 trucks came by in a convoy. They're coming in.
Right now. That goes by, you're like, what is that? It almost looks like it's military, honest to God.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You call these people up. I mean, there was the guy no longer is there, but I would call him up to ask him some questions, and I might raise my voice a little bit because this is you're getting tired of all this stuff, how it's happening all the time. You get frustrated and everything like that. So I started saying stuff to him, and he started whistling while I was talking, like la 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 la. He says, unless you got something new to tell me, he says, don't bother calling. Oh yeah.
They ruined our water, and I have proof of that. And the lease does state that they are to bring our water back to the original, if not better condition, and they have not done that yet.
Wow.
How
could they?
The only way to clean, the only way to have a clean aquifer is never to dirty it to begin with.
We have methane gas coming into our well, so if we don't vent the gas out of it, it's just going to keep on building up, come into the house, or maybe even explode right there as it goes up.
Okay.
What makes us mad is that they'll come and do a test.
Can you hear the show?
I'd like that one.
That's amazing.
And that well's only been on, what, 10, 15 minutes?
That's what scared my kids at night. It would be louder than that. We'd be sitting there on the couch, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, are we gonna be okay? Are we gonna blow up tonight?
Yeah, are we gonna? The kids would say, my son would say, "Do you think we'll wake up in the morning?"
We have a letter from the DEP shortly after we got contaminated, stating that Cabot did indeed contaminate your water. It is completely their fault. We hold them fully responsible.
Right.
Do you have that in a letter?
Right.
Could
Yeah,
we
I do.
see that? A copy of it?
Yeah, I can show you a
Somewhere.
copy. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to show you where we are in conjunction to the well that
Here's our property right here, and there's the well across the road and up on top of the hill right there.
1,000 foot.
Less
Well,
than,
it's
less
less than that.
976, I think it is.
Yeah.
976 feet.
Wow, that close to the house.
That is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man, that's close.
Dimmick Lemonade, here it is, Dimmick
Right.
Lemonade.
Yeah.
We did have one guy, the first day this thing happened, somebody, I won't mention names or anything like that, he says, "Oh, what's wrong with that water there?" And he took a glass and drank it.
One glass and
We found out. We found out he didn't. He wished he didn't do it. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of stupid to drink something like that.
Man, oh, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that was an IQ test. And
Yeah, it was, and he flunked that one. Right. This is bleaching water. This tank of alum water. So here we go. A pump.
Yeah.
I believe that's how it works. It goes, and then I think that's how. I mean, it's so hard for me to figure it out too. But then a pump for each one of those. Then it comes out of there. It goes into this big tank here. This thing takes the solids. This is a carbon filter, just like a fish tank. When they found out we had gas in the water, and we had it all along, but they never tested for it, they put a gas separator in it. So now, since it's such a big tank, they had to put another pressure tank in here because it was too much water there. So this is a fan that runs 24/7. That vents the gas out. A pipe that goes out the back of the house, around the soffit, and above the roof. So they had to put an air pump on it.
Oh, man.
And push air into here. They put an ultraviolet light in there to combat the bacteria that was building up in there. Okay? And then they put this in here to monitor it to make sure it's working okay. This cartridge right here, that would get dirty within a couple days. When they finally said this is no good, we're going to take it offline, this thing was full of water, she had it drained.
Okay, here we are in Dimock, Pennsylvania at William Mealy's house, and we're going to see if we can light his well water on fire. Yes, we can.
Got it?
Hey kids, it's Santa from the North Pole. Hydrofracking is a naughty word. Please keep our world clean and fresh. Thank you, and we'll see you in December. Bye-bye.
Pursuant to Article 23 of the Environmental Conservation Law, which was passed in 1981. The statute itself, and particularly the preemption portion of it, is unconstitutional. Under the New York State Constitution itself. It's my opinion, definitely, that Article 23 does conflict with the home rule provisions of the state constitution, and thus it should have been passed twice. The issue never even came up. I've looked at it very carefully.
Be aware that it's your right as a citizen to ask your town board, say, we do not want fracking in our town. Article 23 is blatantly unconstitutional and needs to be challenged by towns all across the state. If it was written on this paper, it's unconstitutional. It wouldn't be worth the paper it's written on. You can scrap it, throw it away.
That fills a man's service.
Golly, tarnation, natural gas. Granny, you heard what I said. You shan't be making that snake oil.
I ain't making snake oil. I'm just collecting it. We've been collecting it since we settled this land. Besides, it makes good liniment for my rheumatiz. Carnation, look at that little feller over there coming up over the holler.
I hear tell this fracking can poison my well or even my neighbors.
Mr. Jeb, sir, we have never, ever, and let me repeat that, sir, we have never, ever ruined a water well in all years of gas drilling.
Now that's snake oil. You ain't gonna make a mess of my farm and make all kinds of noise around here, are you, boy?
Ma'am, it's gonna be so quiet on your farm. You're gonna sleep like a baby, just like a little itty bitty baby with your pillow full of cash from the gas money. And by the way, why do you want to stay on this old farm anyways? Why don't you just want to move to Hollywood?
Are our sweat and blood cleared this land. Why would we want to leave this place?
Ma'am, rest assured, your farm will be as it always has been, and your dear departed kinfolk that's laying underneath this ground, sleeping there underneath this earth, they can rest in peace because we are not going to do any harm to your farm. You got to trust me. I'm a Texas Longhorn, man. You just have to believe me.
I don't know. Well, you kind of seem like you're an honest feller, especially being so short and all. I guess we'll go for it.
Oh, there must be a sucker born every day. The boys back at Rip 'em Off Gas Corporation be so proud of me. Just so proud. I had a magnificent performance today. Just magnificent. Those country bumpkins, little do they know they're playing Russian roulette with their farm, with their well, with their neighbors' wells. There must be a sucker born every day.
Just don't know what happened to my house this past year. Must be something in the water.
Well, I'm glad we're here in a private meeting, Jim. We got some stuff we got to talk about that we don't want anybody else to hear about. Oh yeah, the tax revenue. Well, you know, if we can just let these local government people know there's all kinds of tax revenue that's going to be coming in, they're going to be happy as clams. They just want the tax revenue. We can get them to pay for their road, the road repairs. We can get them to pay for everything else that we're going to be doing. They're just happy with tax revenue. But we're probably going to have one of our slick lawyers write something up so it's confusing as hell. Tell me now, Jim, just how does this BS program work? Is this something we can advertise?
Oh yes, we're going to do pictures and slicks and ad slicks, and we're going to have pretty scenes, and we're going to have, maybe we'll even show a little money floating around the area, and we'll have grapes, lots of grapes.
This is the wine country. They just want to see those grapes and they'll be just happy.
Mr. Allslick, we're going to have these people by the grapes. Let's talk about this list of information, because we got to talk about some of these things like the well pads and how much money we're going to give these yokels. And
now, I understand that there could be 8 or 10 well pads per square mile. Is that about right?
It's going to be kind of crowded here.
No, that sounds good to me. So we're going to get these glossies down to the art department. They're going to work them up and have grapes all over the place. We can sell this to the local yokels.
Well, there's two things left. One is the potential for a lawsuit. And of course, we've got all the big name lawyers for that.
Our slick lawyers can take care of that.
This Article 23, it's a catch-22 plus 1 when you look at it. This Article 23 apparently is local law in New York State, something to do with home rule, and every time you want to change something, they throw Article 23 at you, which is good for us. Problem is that someone has told us that it's unconstitutional.
If we just bring up 6 or 7 of our slick lawyers out of Texas, they'll be able to take care of this Article 23. It'll be confusing enough in legalese that nobody's going to have any problem with 23. And if you help me bring up a little cash, show a little cash here and there, people are going to be just fine. Once we start drilling, that cash is going to flow like water.
Yeah, with all those chemicals in it.
Oh, well,
yes, sir.
We'll just truck them off someplace and dump them. I'm thinking when this is all done, we're done drilling, I'm going to quit the business, I'm going to retire, I'm probably going to go to Monte Carlo.
Monte Carlo sounds good to me. But if you could really think about staying here, boy.
Sounds pretty nice, but I don't know that I want to retire here with all that not so clean water in the water table. You can just imagine after 4 or 5 years that the properties are going to be devalued. People are going to worry about their wells potentially being a little bit suspicious. We're going to make a ton of money.
One more thing. We need to plant somebody or two at these town meetings. We need to get some people in there who can tell us what's going on. It's even possible to get a supervisor or two.
Now, you know, Jim, in the last 4 or 5 years, the price of natural gas has fallen by about 2/3. But we got it made, because we're going to get these leases cheap. We're going to frack this gas, then we're going to store it in the ground. And when prices go, we're going to sell it to the foreign countries. But we'll have a little ad campaign that says this is for the national good. We're producing this for our own country. Well, you know, Jim, around this country for the last couple of years, there's the Boone Pickens type of people, and they're all out there advertising how clean natural gas is. And natural gas is clean. The problem is, it isn't very clean to get it out of the ground.
You ever hear that quote from the famous newspaper man back in the 19th century, H.L. Mencken?
I don't believe I have.
Well, we got it right here. This is what the man said. No one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American people.
I think we got that one right here.
We got it right
now. Yeah. I love it.
This is a very dangerous industry. And the conditions for the workers are horrible. And again, without any regulations and no OSHA inspectors out there, there was just a worker killed near Dimock, Pennsylvania, when gas pressure built up unexpectedly. I don't know all the details of that. That was a couple of weeks ago. We saw that 11 workers were killed on the Deepwater Horizon blowout. These are very dangerous jobs. And it's heavily industrial. You know, they try to sell this to us by saying, oh, look at all the jobs it will create. Most of those jobs don't go to local people. They come from roustabouts that travel around. And so you have workers exposed to horrendous pressure and chemicals and companies that are always trying to save money at the expense of the environment and the workers. And so there should be strict OSHA requirements. No one, if you're a worker and you don't even know what the chemicals are, these are horrible chemicals. They're so bad that last August we saw an article in Newsweek about an emergency room nurse in Colorado who treated a frack worker who had had frack fluid spilled on his clothes, and he still had some of the chemicals on his boots and his clothes. He came into the emergency room. She treated him for 10 minutes. That 10-minute exposure to the vapors of those chemicals almost killed her. She was in intensive care for 2 weeks, and it almost ruined her liver. Those are the kinds of chemicals that we're talking about here. They're very dangerous. The companies won't tell us what they are. It's a recipe for disaster. And we really ought to be concerned about the men and women that work out on these pads, because they're victims of this as well.
Has any of the gas companies told you what chemicals they use in their frac fluid?
No.
So you go in, like if there would be an accident from a tanker truck flipping over, wrecking and spilling all the frac fluid, the wastewater frac fluid, you would know nothing about what you and your guys are getting into and how to keep yourself safe.
No, I think it's wrong. These gas companies should tell everybody what chemicals they're dealing with, especially for us firefighters being first responders. Going to that scene, hospitals, when they take a patient, anybody, even around the area. So if it does happen, we have to evacuate or whatever. That is the gas company's responsibility. You know, they can go to different fire departments, you know, especially if they're drilling in their area. Just do a little bit of a seminar, let us know what chemicals we're using.
That's
if there's
excellent.
hazmat materials we need to carry, suits, all that stuff. It's just a good factor to have the knowledge of what they're dealing with as far as chemicals, so we can protect ourselves and others. That's the big thing.
Hi, I'm Sandra Steingraber. I'm a biologist and I study chemicals that cause cancer. And my entree into that subject began when I myself was diagnosed with cancer when I was 20 years old. I found out I had bladder cancer. And years later, as a PhD biologist, I went back to my hometown and discovered that there were chemicals linked to bladder cancer in my hometown drinking water wells. And so I've spent the last 20 years working with communities on environmental health threats that raise their risk for cancer, and more recently for miscarriages and birth defects and childhood asthma and early puberty in girls and all these kind of problems. And honestly, I've never seen a threat that's bigger and more frightening to me as a biologist than fracking. And that's because it doesn't involve just one chemical that causes cancer. It involves dozens and dozens of chemicals. And even though these are known and suspected carcinogens, the law allows them to be pumped into our bedrock, and they come back up, and then they have to be disposed of somewhere else. And there's so many ways in which these chemicals can get into our communities, into our breast milk, into our children's bodies. And I'm not just a biologist and a cancer survivor, I'm also a mother. So the worst thing about fracking for me is it prevents me from being a parent, right? Because the primary job of being a parent is to keep your children safe. And if the air is full of carcinogens and if the water is contaminated, I can't keep my children safe. Of all human diseases, cancer is the most expensive disease that you can have. And I actually had the most expensive kind of cancer you can have, which is bladder cancer. And that's because it tends to recur in 40 to 70% of patients. So once you get diagnosed, you're in the medical system forever. And so I'm always every few months going back in for more checkups and back for more scans and back for more urinalyses. And I'm always in a position, and right now I'm in another one of those, where I'm waiting for lab results. And sometimes I jump when the phone rings. Because I think it might be the lab telling me what the latest results are, especially if I know that the last test has turned out ambiguous. You know, I don't want my kids to have to jump when the phone rings because they're waiting for a lab report from the pathology lab. And so I see that it's my job as their mom to make sure that this industrial machine that relies on carcinogens to get gas out of our bedrock and that shatters the bedrock below our feet, it's my job to say no to that.
I'm the director of the Center for Healthy Environments and Communities, and I'm also the director of the Risk Assessment Certificate Program at the Graduate School of Public Health. There has recently been in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, a blowout where approximately 1 million gallons of fracking fluid spilled onto soil, was sprayed onto soil, as well as we had 16 hours of uninterrupted wet gas exhaust going into the environment. This isn't just methane, it's also benzene and toluene, xylene, ethylbenzene, scores of different vapors, as well as numerous other gases including butane, propane, etc., and some really quite exotic species of gases also.
Conrad, can you tell me about the increase in crime rate?
Sure. Well, there has been in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner has gotten together with PennDOT, and they've released a report showing that we have some severe impacts on our roads from truck traffic. This goes into there being increases in accidents on those roads. We have had reports throughout the region, including in West Virginia, of emergency vehicles being held up because of jackknifed road traffic associated with Marcellus Shale usage. An increase in the numbers of transient workers coming through Pennsylvania that are working in Pennsylvania that are sexual predators, and they have not reported according to Pennsylvania's Megan Law rules Megan's Law's rules when they come into certain municipalities. That is a problem, as well as increased reports of alcoholism, DUIs, alcohol road deaths, and even increases in drug usage in certain areas.
And you're right, the companies are highly competitive. Gets back to what I said before. They're not operating under a national energy policy. They're operating under their own corporate business plans. And they're not going to share data. They might, if forced by a DEP or a DEC, to share best practices, but they're certainly not going to share data. The fact that we can have two companies operating in close proximity, perhaps only a mile apart on two different developments, fracking at the same time, could that increase the probability of one causing a problem with the other? Absolutely. There's hard and fast data that is happening. I just read a report out of British Columbia. Yes, the Canadians are also developing shale gas. And in the last year, they have had 18 reported incidents of loss of control of a well under development due to intersection of that well by another well that was being fracked. Loss of control means that literally the company that was drilling or fracking a well was not able to control the pressure in that well, and the usual resources had to be brought to bear. And in all 18 cases, they were able to control the situation. But the point here is that the British government has concluded, and they have this in writing, that at this state of development, and it's mid-2010, and we've had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of shale wells drilled over the United States in the last 15, 20 years, the British Columbia government issued an advisory to all the companies operating in British Columbia that it is currently not possible to accurately predict the volume of rock that is actually being stimulated during a hydraulic fracturing process. Therefore, be careful when you're drilling near each other. Well, that's in northeastern British Columbia. There's nobody living there. Moose. And I'm really concerned about the moose, but not nearly as much as I'm concerned about 1 mile from where we're sitting if the same thing were to happen and the blowout preventer fails. Okay. So yes, this does heighten the danger. A few dozen gas development companies operating in West Virginia and Pennsylvania right now. And there'll be many more coming onto the scene. Some larger, many more smaller. Smaller the company, the less the resources that company has. The less likely it is that that company is going to be able to bring the best technology to bear, follow the regulations to the letter. And so I'm very concerned about the so-called bottom feeders coming in on the edges and coming in after the fact and taking over wells that perhaps other companies are saying are no longer fruitful. It is considerably more risky to intensely frack using high volume hydraulic fracturing a shale deposit that is only a few thousand feet down compared to a shale deposit that may be 5,000 to 8,000 feet down. And let me dispel a myth that I read all the time on industry websites. Well, if we're 5,000 feet down, that's 5,000 feet of solid rock between the gas-bearing shale and the water table. Not true. The first thing one learns in Geology 101 is there's a difference between rock and a rock mass. So if one takes a piece of Marcellus shale, you can say that rock is very impermeable. It's tight. Fluids like gases or liquids do not want to flow through it. But it is true that Marcellus is also highly fractured already. It's been fractured over the last 350 million years. And the whole purpose of hydraulic fracturing is to get those fractures to communicate with the well because they are very good conduits of fluids like gas and liquids. So all that rock, those thousands of feet of rock, is not solid rock. It's sedimentary rock, and all those sedimentary layers, you can see them exposed in the gorges around here, are all fractured. So the idea that because it's been safe down there for 350 million years, well, that's true, but now you're going down and you're poking 70,000 holes in it, and you're increasing the pressure, and you're opening up joints by the hydraulic fracturing process under pressures that rock formation has never seen in 350 million years. The point is that you have human disturbance of something that was in geo-equilibrium. Again, Mother Nature said, fine, things are okay. The gas ain't going up. But you're coming down and you're stimulating. You're changing the stress state, you're changing the geometry, you're changing the fracture patterns. And to then say that there's no possibility, especially when you get to shallow layers, like in where we are sitting in Ithaca, New York, where the Marcellus is only 2,000 to 2,500 feet down, to say that we now have, well, 1,000 feet of already fractured sedimentary rocks between the lowest level of the freshwater table and the highest level of the Marcellus, that's dangerous. What I'm concerned about is this is our Grand Canyon. This is our Yosemite. This is our Yellowstone. This is what New York State has to offer the rest of the country as far as natural beauty is concerned. Why not drill in Yellowstone? Why not drill in a national park? To us, this is a wonderful region of natural beauty. It's a place where obviously 100,000 people come to vacation every year. That industry has a good chance of disappearing, just like the industry for going to the white sandy beaches of Pensacola, Florida is disappearing right now. Yet that won't come back for years and years. That's a tremendous loss. It might not ever come back. Why ruin something which is precious and irreproducible for something which is fleeting and only gives people money in their pocket, and a relatively few people? I just don't understand why we would do something like that. Of all the land in Tompkins County that has been leased in the last 5 to 10 years, that land is only owned by 6% of the people of Tompkins County. In the state of New York, of those 19.8 million people, only 2 to 3% of those 19.8 million people are going to directly benefit through leasing their land and getting royalties. How about the rest of us? Now, sure, some might benefit because they're business owners that might benefit from the business, but many others, myself included, are going to wind up losing our environment, living in an industrial zone, having to pay higher taxes because the gas company obviously doesn't want to pay a severance tax. I think it's the height of hypocrisy for the gas companies to say, well, the taxes will be going to the state of New York through the income taxes on the people to whom we're paying royalties. I mean, that's a pass-through that's beyond belief. So I don't understand why the people of New York don't rise up.
Since the fracking industry is beginning to get a much-deserved bad rap, what do you think the gas industry will do to counteract the increased public awareness of its many shortfalls?
Another great question, Jeff. So the way I characterize the industry's public relations endeavors over the last year is as follows. Stage 1, put on your white hat, get on your white horse, ride into town and say, we're here. And that worked in Wyoming, it worked in Colorado, worked in Texas, worked in Arkansas. And they quickly found out it wasn't going to work in New York. Why? Because we had some enlightened people in Albany who said, whoa, 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 this is different. This is not what you were doing. We're going to stop and look and listen and study. And they said, oh, geez, I wonder what happened here. Ah, it's the fracking fluid wastes. That's the problem. Deep well injection. That was phase 2 of the industry's PR campaign. What we're going to do is make sure that all the stuff that comes back up from hydraulic fracturing just gets put right back down. And we're going to go to the EPA-regulated deep well injection technology. And then Pulteney happened. For those of you who don't remember that, of course you two do. A gas company who was then developing and drilling in Pennsylvania sought to take their frack wastes and dump them down a deep well injection facility in the Finger Lakes, about 3/4 of a mile from one of our most beautiful Finger Lakes. And that caused a tremendous uproar and a backlash, and the corporations got a bad name, first of all because they were taking waste from Pennsylvania and shipping it to New York. I don't know why, because they didn't have a place to put it in Pennsylvania, and they still don't. But pretty soon the people of New York realized that there are only 2 licensed injection wells in the whole state of New York. And the whole theory behind deep injection wells is that you put down what you take out. The law says that you have to inject in the same formation from which you extracted. Well, you have to work so hard to get gas out of Marcellus. It's impossible to put a fluid like fracturing fluid back into the Marcellus to store it. So we don't have the right geology here for deep well injection. Phase 3. Let's see, the white hat didn't work, deep well injections didn't work. Let's beat them with their own words. Green. Recycling. Right? If you ever want to be friends with the environmental people, just mention recycling. So suddenly, about 6 months ago, the word recycling was all over the PR. Now, these are companies that have been producing gas from gas shales for decades. You think they would have figured this out a long time ago. But it was only until they got stopped in their tracks at the border between Pennsylvania and New York that they realized that, oh wow, we had to figure out a way of reducing the amount of waste fluids from the hydraulic fracturing process. All the bright people that I used to work with, they knew that. But the people up in the boardroom, hey, that costs too much money. It takes off our bottom line to have to recycle that fluid.
Yep.
You know, we got to figure out technology, we have to develop the technology, we have to deploy the technology, and it's going to cost money and energy to recycle those fluids. So now what you're hearing out of Pennsylvania is up to 90%. We have the technology now to recycle up to 90% of the returned water and the waste frac fluid. What they don't say is that, yeah, that's true. They have the technology to do that. But what they're not saying is that they're using it. Some companies are using good technologies and they're doing their best to try to reduce the amount of waste fluids by using recycling. Other companies are ignoring it. And there's no law in the state of Pennsylvania, and as yet there is no law in the state of New York, no regulation that says you must recycle, and you must recycle up to a certain percentage or we're not going to give you a permit. But I would just ask who's ever watching this movie to recall what happened when the leaders of the 3 companies involved in the Gulf spill were asked to testify before a congressional committee. And it was a circular firing squad. All right? It's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. The one thing that the oil and gas industry is noted for is good lawyering and risk spreading so that nobody gets caught with most of the responsibility and with a deep pocket. So if they can shed the responsibility onto somebody with a smaller pocket or a shallower pocket, that's what they'll try to do. So can that happen? Yes. Should it happen? No. Why? Because if we had proper regulation and proper enforcement of regulation along the lines that I just mentioned, no recycling, no permit. Recycling at a minimum level, and you have to show us what you're going to do with the solid waste that's left. So I've had someone from a gas company say that not a single drop of fresh water that they bring to a well pad ever leaves as waste. All right, so that's called a lie. Mm-hmm. This guy's mother should have taught him better. So. Yes, there is waste still coming off of pads even when recycling is being used effectively. There's less, that's good, but there's also solid waste, which is now highly concentrated with all the bad stuff that Mother Nature, I love Mother Nature, she stored it down there for 350 million years and it was safe down there. We brought it back up to the surface and now it's our responsibility to dispose of it properly so that we're not hurting Mother Earth and the people on its surface. And I don't see any technology yet. I don't see any industrial waste facilities under construction in New York State that have the proper machinery, the proper chemistry, and the proper processes to handle that highly concentrated waste. Until we do, there's no place to put it, and they're going to be sneaking it into landfills as they're doing now. They're going to sneaking it into back road dumping as they're doing it now, or they're holding it in storage ponds. I've had my friends at another university in Pennsylvania say that in Pennsylvania the technology's evolved now that they don't store return water or frac fluid in open pits. And I know that's a lie. So what they're saying is the one company that's paying them to say it is using steel tanks for temporary storage. But I know for a fact that just last week 22 cows were quarantined on a Pennsylvania farm because they were drinking return frac water that was leaking out of an open pit. So these are the problems that we face. They have not yet been solved. Keep them out of New York State.
Hi, I'm Dr. Earl Robinson, and I live in Lauman, New York, next to the Chemung County landfill, which is about a half a mile away. In the fall of this year, the Chemung County landfill started bringing in drill cuttings from Pennsylvania, from Marcellus shale. We didn't know anything about this until later on in the year, when one of the neighbors found out, and we questioned the county on this in Casella. They're currently trying to bring in upwards of 441,000 tons of this material a year. The Chemung County landfill is situated only a couple hundred yards from the Chemung River. It sits on top of the Chemung Aquifer, and the drill cuttings contain heavy metals and radioactive waste. How you find the Marcellus is you drop a Geiger counter into the well, and when you hit the Marcellus, the Geiger counter starts chirping. And you know, because of the high radioactivity, that you've entered the Marcellus area of black shale. There is no safe level of radioactivity. The Marcellus shale contains radium-226, which is extremely radioactive, being over 1 million times more radioactive than the same amount of uranium. Radium chemically is similar to calcium, and if it's inhaled, ingested, it will go into your bones and irradiate your bone marrow. The New York State Department of Health has given this information to the Department of Environmental Conservation of New York State, and they obviously have not acted on it because they are receiving this material from Pennsylvania. The fact that New York State has not approved or looked into or regulated Marcellus gas drilling in New York State, and the fact that Pennsylvania is shipping this material here by the tens of thousands of tons makes absolutely no sense at all. You know, I mean, we need somehow to get the DEC to do its job. It's not currently doing its job.
So here, the DEC at the highest level has got a pending study of the radioactivity of these cuttings and the waste generally, among other things, among other kinds of impacts that shale well development in New York would have. But prior to ever finishing that study, they've allowed the disposal of large volumes of this waste. These folks have been taking about 2,000 tons a week of drill cutting waste from Pennsylvania and dumping it in the Chemung County landfill. And it came out in the issues conference of this proceeding that they were doing so at 2 other landfills that they operate, in Angelica, the Highland landfill, and the Ontario landfill. When the radioactive waste is mixed with organic waste in a municipal solid waste landfill, it generates radon. 100% of the radon generated in landfills that contain radioactive waste will escape into the environment and affect the people downwind. The Department of Health is saying that needs to be tested and assessed before any decision about disposal can be made. And here, as I say, the DEC never tested it. And Casella, the testing that they provided was provided by a lab that was not licensed to do so. In addition, they went to 3 Marcellus well sites in Pennsylvania and were given the samples. They didn't take the samples themselves. And at one point the judge said, why don't they take this waste at Pennsylvania landfills? Pennsylvania has the most landfills of any state in the union, after all. Why is it that it has to come to New York landfills? Is there some prohibition on dumping it in Pennsylvania? And that question was never answered. New York shouldn't be allowing New Yorkers to be guinea pigs for Pennsylvania's experiment. Particularly Casella's workers are going to be the persons most acutely exposed, but people in the host communities for these landfills where Casella is bringing this waste are also going to be exposed through airborne particles that contain high levels of radium-226.
By fracking with 1,500 pounds per square inch, we're creating mini earthquakes, and that is a much more risky process than what's going on in the Gulf. And most people in upstate New York think of gas wells that are very small, very finite, that can be very close to buildings and have no impact. That's their grandfather's gas well. This is so far from that as to be in an entirely different league. There's 5 to 10 acres cleared, there's huge rigs. This is an industrial operation that dwarfs the old gas wells that we're used to. Well, one of the problems with frac fluid is it comes out of the wells, and half of it stays in the ground, and we're just supposed to pretend that it disappears. But the 4 million gallons or so that come out, it comes out radioactive, so that's a very difficult problem to treat. It comes out 5 to 6 times saltier than seawater. And that makes it impossible to treat in municipal treatment plants because that is a bacteria-based operation. The salt would interfere with that. In Pennsylvania, they allowed them to dump it into the Monongahela River, a huge river. 350 people live downstream that drink it for drinking water. What they found out last summer was that it was so salty, the river itself was so salty that the steel mills could not use the water for their cooling purposes because it was corroding their pipes. And similar problems were happening in people's homes. And so one of the problems that this industry wants us to ignore is the fact that it creates millions of gallons of frac fluid that is toxic, radioactive, too salty, has hundreds of chemicals, and can't be treated. Where are we going to put all this water? That's the problem that they brought to Pulteney, and they wanted to dump it underground and pretend that it wouldn't exist. There's never been horizontal hydraulic fracturing in New York State. There's been some very limited vertical fracking, but that's 80,000 gallons compared to 8 million gallons. That's like your neighbor asking if he can park his car in your driveway, and you come back and there's 200 cars there. What we find out about the production of natural gas using this method is that it is dirtier, or as dirty as coal, when we factor in all of the diesel engines that are involved in its drilling, compressing, pumping, fracking. 24/7 we have diesel engines running, 1,500 horsepower diesel engines. That's all carbon exhaust contributing to global warming. When you add to that the fact that methane is 20 to 72 times worse for global warming than CO2, any leak of methane from one of these wells takes away any advantage that we gain by not burning coal and oil. And we have to get renewable energies. We have to get wind, solar, geothermal, truly renewable energies. That's what we should be putting all of our energy into and all of our subsidies. And anything else is a false construct just to keep us addicted to Exxon and Chesapeake and Halliburton. It's time we sent those companies packing and developed really renewable energy. That's what our children and grandchildren deserve.
And I snapped a picture, ran back to my car, and just was buckling my seatbelt, and I looked out the front window of the car, and the backhoe was coming straight at me, barreling, and just went around the front of my car, pulled up to my window, and the man barked, "Is that for your report?" Well, my heart was really pounding because I thought, what if he had lost control and the gravel then coming straight at my car? So I did try to snap a picture, being the photographer, but I was so shaken I just got my knee in the dashboard. I say this is the third year of the occupation of Dimmock, because I've been going at this for 3 years, and I was never in a war, never lived through wartime, but I equate this to a war because I am the resistance, and we are occupied, and someone has come into our lives and taken over, and they have gotten the support of some of the locals. I think that happens in war, and then there are some of us that can see it as not a good thing, as an occupation. I do this, I feel that I have to do it, and my support for my family. My dad is 84 years old, still alive, and he's a World War II vet, and he's my biggest supporter, as is my husband and my daughter, who are proud of me. But my dad told me he didn't have a choice in World War II. The war came to him, he fought in it, and he said, "You'll do that, Vic, you'll do the right thing, you can't put your head in the sand." So I do this for my father and my daughter.